Hi, welcome back to Anime Insights. Today, I will be recapping the second season of Megalobox. Roughly 5 years since Joe won the title belt in Megalonia, he wanders to different underground fighting rings with simple boxing gear under the name Nomad. His only demand is that the fight should be legit so that he can make money to fuel his drug addiction. After overhearing about another highly skilled former pro Megaloboxer called Chief racking up wins, Nomad offers to be his next opponent. He recognizes Chief from the bar he visited the other night, while Chief appears to know his real identity as Joe. During the fight, Nomad realizes that Chief was the one paid to lose by the promoters as Nomad wins by a knockout on a weak punch. In the parking lot afterward, Chief punches Nomad in the gut, taunting him for relying on drugs. As Joe speeds off into the wilderness on his bike, he encounters a dead wolf and decides to bury him. Later, the ghost of Nanba returns to haunt him. Afterward, Nomad registers himself for another fight when his motorbike is hotwired and stolen by an immigrant boy. He follows the boy back to a makeshift community in an abandoned amusement park. Nomad finds that the boy, Mio, has already given the bike and the boxing gear to his mother Marla for scrap. As she offers to help him repair the bike, Nomad collapses. He later wakes up in a trailer as the community is preparing for a festival. Suddenly, a construction crew appears and demands that the immigrants clear out as the land is about to be sold at auction. However, Chief appears at the front and convinces the crew to hold off demolition until the auction actually goes through. Later that night, Chief admits to Nomad that he isn't a real ranked boxer, but he pretended to be one so he could earn money by throwing away matches. In the past, he was inspired by Gearless Joe's battle, which made him travel to this country and chase the dream of a better life. Mia overhears Chief refer to Nomad as Joe and ends up telling a mob lieutenant named Tetsu about him. The next day, Nomad speeds off on his bike as mob boss Hikawa comes looking for him, while Chief boasts about his plan to win the upcoming boxing tournament. He also plans to buy his community's land back with the prize money. Meanwhile, Nomad flashes back to his last moments with Nambu and blames himself for his death as he opens another bottle of painkillers before a fight. The next night, Nomad returns to Chief and offers to train with him, claiming that he stopped taking the drugs. Joe works with Chief, but suddenly collapses from the withdrawal of drugs and memories of Nambu's death. Meanwhile, Tetsu and his thugs lead a harassment campaign against the immigrants, hoping to drive them out before the auction. Meanwhile, the opening day of the Grand Boxing Tournament arrives, and Joe continues dealing with his inner demons. Regardless of that, his strategy works as Chief wins his opening match with a first-round knockout. On the other hand, Marla tells Joe more about Chief's history. He had a wife who died early on and a frail but brilliant son named Carlo, who helped design Chief's gear to focus on defense. When Carlo died on the journey to this country, Chief abused painkillers and alcohol until one day when his gear broke down after a match. This made him break down in tears before swearing to honor Carlo's memory by getting clean. Later, as Chief and his community fix a water pump, Joe reconciles with his memory of Nambu. He then cuts his hair in time for the next tournament match, where Chief's acting abilities help him knock out his opponent. Later that night, Tetsu's thugs toss a fire grenade into the settlement, setting Chief's trailer on fire. Though his trailer is destroyed, Chief manages to escape with minor burns and his box full of cash. Meanwhile, Mio takes the blame for the fire and decides to leave on his own. As the finals of the tournament begin, the developer tells Hikawa that he doesn't care who wins as long as he is paid for the lot. Hikawa's boxer Mamiya uses racist taunts and illegal punches to provoke Chief into making critical mistakes. Chief and Mamiya are both worn down during the fight until Mayo suddenly returns to cheer on Chief, giving him the resolve to knock out Mamiya. With the winnings from the tournament combined with Chief's previous savings, his community has the money to buy their land. Chief convinces Joe to get back into boxing for real and hopes to have a real match against him soon. However, the next day, Chief is shown dead in his truck. The community holds a funeral for him, as Marla finishes the purchase of the community's land. Meanwhile, Mio tells Joe that they decided to bequeath Chief's gear in his memory. Joe thanks both Marla and Mio and leaves on his bike as he plans to stop running from his past. He soon returns to Gym Nowhere to find it broken. Flashbacks reveal that Nambu was fighting cancer while Edison Liu, Yuri's student, requested a match with Joe, but he was only focused on running the orphanage and being a trainer at the gym. Joe wanted to win the money from the match in hopes of using it to pay for treatment for Nambu. He spent several weeks training, but Sakio saw his actions as ignoring Nambu while his condition got worse. In the present, Joe falls asleep in a broken gym but wakes up to find an older Sakio attacking him. After seeing his face, Joe lets Sakio punch him into unconsciousness. Later, Joe finds out from Aragaki that after a typhoon swept through the area over a year ago, Sakio managed to rescue the kids. However, the gym was never restored as everyone either went to another orphanage or took on jobs. Sakio later asked Aragaki to teach him how to fight, but unlike Joe, he didn't have the natural talent for it. Regardless, Aragaki trained him anyway. Sakio later enters into an underground fighting ring and gets beaten badly, but still refuses to talk to Joe as he leaves the arena. After some time, as Joe fetches some water, he spots Bonjuri, Sakyo's childhood friend, who drops a flyer for his restaurant and speeds off. At the restaurant, a couple of local gangsters start harassing Oriko until Sakyo smashes a bottle over their heads. The gangsters come back and ransack the restaurant before taking off with a deed to the building. Fujimaki later offers Sakyo a chance to get the deed back if he can win a fight against a tougher opponent. Just before the fight, Joe decides to enter the ring in Sakyo's place as Gearless Joe. Throughout this fight, Joe flashes back to his fight with Edison Liu and how Nambu's condition took a turn for the worst minutes before the fight. During that encounter, Joe was knocked out in the second round. In the present, Gearless Joe also gets knocked out against his opponent. As the kids wait for Joe's return, he reveals that he lost the fight, but got the deed back. However, an angry Sakyo tells Joe to leave. On the other hand, Edison trains hard for an upcoming match against Mac Rosario. However, after Edison hears that Joe is back in town, he decides to ask him to be his sparring partner. Edison believes that despite beating Joe 5 years ago, the media and fans still see him as Yuri's student and not as a pro Megaloboxer. Meanwhile, Mac gives an interview to the media as they go over his history of being an ill-tempered boxer who decided to become a cop. Mac was paralyzed while saving innocents from a gang dispute until a young scientist named Sakuma got permission to test a new brain encoding system on him. Mac got a fresh start in boxing, and Sakuma got a chance to display his product's results to the world. The next day, Joe shows up to practice with Edison, but they are soon interrupted when they find Samba taping their fight to use in his next article. Edison swears to take on Joe for real after his fight with Mac. Finally, the match day arrives. Joe and the kids get ringside seats, though Sakyo does not show up. On the other hand, Yukiko also encounters her brother Mikio. The match between Edison and Mac begins. An initially cautious Edison quickly figures Mac out and gains the upper hand. However, as the fight looks all but lost for Mac, he counterattacks with sudden focus, a phenomenon known by his fans as Mac time. Edison goes down in a flash and Mac is named the new champion. With Edison gravely injured and hospitalized, Yuri voices to Joe his feelings of guilt and pushing his dreams onto him. Meanwhile, Mac displays erratic behavior at home, forcibly taking food from his son Miguel. Maya, Mac's wife, brings her concerns to Sakuma, who appears sympathetic but simply attributes Mac's behavior to stress. On the other hand, Yukiko contemplates the earlier meeting with her brother where he claimed that Mac time is the result of the brain encoding system's negative effect on the brain. Afterwards, Santa and Bonjuri start helping Joe restore Jim Nowhere. Yukiko secretly has Sakuma investigated and discovers that he has been discussing the use of brain encoding with the military. She confronts Sakuma and demands undisclosed experiment data on Mac. Sakuma seemingly complies but orders the data to be manipulated before they are sent. At the hospital, Edison regains consciousness but is told that he will not be able to fully recover and return to boxing. Edison then tells Joe that he will not give up as they have a fight promised. Afterward, Joe visits Nambu's grave and runs into Sakyo. He tells Joe that Jim Nowhere died when Joe left years ago and that things can't go back to normal just because he rebuilds the place. Later, when a typhoon threatens the gym, Aragaki and Oicho join the group to help tie down the building to save it. Afterward, Mac challenges Joe to a fight, but Joe is hesitant and does not accept. Meanwhile, Yukiko announces to a displeased Shirado group board that she is considering severing ties with Sakuma's industry because of the risks and the potential military use of the brain encoding system. Sakuma sends his head researcher Yoshimura to pressure Mikio to retract his thesis on the risks of the encoding system, but Mikio in turn suggests to his former student to accept and fix the mistakes. On the other hand, Joe sees Mac visiting Edison in the hospital. He reveals how much Joe's journey to become the champion inspired him, and Edison encourages Joe to accept the fight. After recalling his time with Chief, Joe decides to fight Mac. Edison then asks a reluctant Yuri to help Joe prepare, telling him that he should not blame himself for what happened. Joe comes to Sakyo and the two start to fight. Joe tells Sakyo that it was not Sakyo's fault that he lost against Edison and left everyone years ago. Sakyo agrees to come to Jim Nowhere, but just then Joe collapses. He is taken to the hospital, and the children learn about the damage to Joe's body from his previous painkiller addiction. Maya is contacted by Asamoto from Shirado Group and asked about Mac's condition, but she says nothing. Sakuma tells Yukiko that he has no intention of parting ways with the Shirado Group and giving up on the encoding system. Later, Joe is discharged from the hospital, and his friends hold a party at the newly rebuilt Jim Nowhere. Joe opens up about his experiences on the road and promises not to keep secrets. He then asks everyone for their thoughts on accepting Mac's challenge, which will likely be the final fight of his career. Despite their concerns, they agree to respect Joe's wishes and to help him prepare for the fight. He announces that he will not fight Gearless this time, but will instead use Chief's gear. After another episode of mental breakdown, Mac is told by Maya that she offered him up to Sakuma's experiment when he was paralyzed in exchange for a heart transplant for their sick son. Mac confronts Sakuma, who insists that Maya made the right choice and that Mac was able to achieve great things because of it. Heartbroken, Mac wanders around the streets aimlessly. Meanwhile, Joe begins training with Yuri and Aragaki, while the children work on improving Chief's gear. Their focus is not on defeating Mac, but on playing defensively so that Joe can finish the fight safely. Later, Mac runs into an old colleague from his days as a police officer, who tells him how others look up to him. Mac reminisces about his life and his young son. Mac then decides to return home and tells Sakuma that he will do this fight his way and walk away from Sakuma. After some days, the day of the match arrives. Before the start, Yukiko informs Sakuma that both of them must take responsibility for the negative effects the encoding system has had on Mac. It is revealed that Yoshimura brought the real data on Mac to Mikio and Yukiko, and that Mac and Maya asked for their help in revealing the truth and finishing the fight without entering Mac time. Although Joe and Mac are evenly matched at the beginning of the fight, Joe goes down first due to his poor condition. However, Joe is able to come back and knocks down Mac. Mac focuses on his family and is able to fight on at an exceptional level without entering Mac time. As the fighters continue to trade blows, Sakio throws in the towel, just as he promised Joe earlier. Due to that, Mac is declared the winner of the match. Later, Yukiko announces that she is opening up encoding system technology to the world so that everyone can benefit from it. She then steps down from her company post and Sakuma is arrested. Edison begins his rehabilitation training with Yuri, while Joe returns to Gym Nowhere to be amongst his friends. They then see Sakio off, who has decided to leave Gym Nowhere to pursue his original dream of becoming a gear engineer. And that is the end of the second season of Megalobox. To watch more content like this, please make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more.